In the previous video with the 4runner, we made the core of the bumper. To me, making the core section is incredibly important. It is where the mounting sections are located, as well as where the main structural points are. So if the core is solid, the rest of the bumper can easily just tie into it.
Welcome back to the channel. I'm Robert, and this is the Project Nomad, and we're continuing building up this rear bumper for the 4runner. We're continuing this bumper build, and at this moment we are at building up the sides or the wing portion of the bumper. So this is what we're working with right here. We already have the standoff built up and welded on, and this is going to be the foundation of the wings. And what I'm trying to do right now is trying to figure out how much or what the shape of the top plate is going to be like. I want it to be a singular piece that goes from this top section all the way around to slightly underneath the fender flare right there. And the way that I'm going about getting my measurements is through a multi-square like this, just trying to line it up and lock it in and trying to find what is the correct spacing or the correct angle for me to use. And currently for me, I have found that it is currently 105 degrees. I'm also going to try and match that on the outside portion right here, so that the outermost plate on the corner actually starts tapering inward, so that it isn't just going to be a straight line. And the reason I want it to be tapered inward is so that the following plate that matches on the outside is tapered in as well, so that it has a little bit more structure and has a little and will deflect if we have to skirt a rock or we have to hit something. It isn't just going to be stuck on a solid flat surface. So that's what I'm trying to do right now, just creating this top plate in one single piece, and I'm just getting some measurements from it.
While I'm not basing any of these angles on any template or anything solid, I'm just trying to eyeball everything, and I'm taking a lot of inspirations on how other Toyota bumpers look, but I'm more importantly making sure this fits to the contours of this specific rig. And since I'm really making this bumper from scratch, making templates or any kind of aids really helps in the process, especially if you're trying to get opposite sides to match or just even look uniform. It makes even a cardboard template a great tool in this kind of application.
Just two parallel lines coming into a segment where I know is going to be the cutoff point, and from here it's going to be the straight line all the way across. I'm just trying to keep it as straight as possible, but this is what it's looking like. Honestly, I don't mind, and it looks pretty good in my opinion, but I'm gonna put it onto this 3/16 plate here. I'm gonna cut out roughly 6-inch strips for this entire section. If you can see the line markings, what I'm essentially doing is cutting 3 6-inch segments right here, so that one of them I can use for both sides of the top plates. The reason I'm doing that is so that 2 of these strips are going to be used for the side paneling, so that it matches and it is long enough that I can taper all the way to the bottom of the mounts. But for the top plate, I am basically just going to transpose this pattern onto the plate itself. I think I can get away with just using a singular 4-foot by 6-inch strip to make both top plates so that both sides are mirrored.
To cut out the strips out of this plate, I'm just using an angle grinder and several cutoff wheels that I'm burning through. And for the most part, this entire bumper could actually be done on a budget. All you need are 2 tools, the angle grinder that I'm using and the welder.
I finally got all 3 cut out, and I took the straightest one here and already transferred the template. If you can see it, it's just a bunch of scratches in there, and looks like I'm only going to be using almost just 2/3 of it. But if that's the case, that means I can save some material on using just one more for the tapering parts going down. But let's see what happens. I'm just going to cut this out now and then bring you guys back when I am lining it up on the actual bumper. Okay, so I have all the parts cut out for the wings on both sides now. The top panels, the back corner, and the sides themselves right here, just 2 of them. My plan right now is to basically get these panels and tack them in so that I can adjust it for the top portion, so that I can match the contour of the panel right here while adjusting the closeness of the top plate to the body back and forth. and getting it correct and having this support it. And this is where this hammer is going to come into place. It's just going to tap it in and out little by little, and from there I'm just going to try and get everything to fit correctly.
When I'm placing and tacking these plates in, I really am just eyeballing the angles and the positioning of the plates. And the way I gauge their positioning is by looking at the body and just eyeballing if the spacing is enough for me. There really isn't a right or wrong way to do this, especially when you're doing it from scratch. You just have to think about it and if it's good enough for you.
I got both sides tacked on pretty much. Parts of it are, well, larger beads, but both sides have been placed, and the only thing I have to worry about now is that it does flex. It does move in and out, so that means I will be doing this portion next. The underside skids so that this thing will just hold its position, and if it ever brushes up against rocks or anything else, this thing isn't gonna flex. But yeah, this is basically all I did, was tack everything into place and then start move everything into position. So for the time being, I think I'm just going to be working on the bottom skids so that everything can be taken off for final welds.
With the bottom plates that make up the skids, I'm just trying to lock in the left to right spacing on the wings because there's still a lot of movement or flex in the sides till they're supported and locked into place, and it's a process that has to be done on both sides so that both sides finally have their permanent spots and it becomes stable enough for me to actually take off of the vehicle and start final welds.
So I got the plates pretty much tacked up on the inside, and on the outside this thing is now stable. The position of the outer wings is pretty much permanent at this point. At least I'd like to assume that. I can always change that, but I did it for both sides. Both plates are pretty much tacked in, and it's stable enough for me to take off the actual vehicle and bring to the work table so I can deal with these complex openings that I have that I didn't really think about until now. So I'm just going to be thinking about how to close these up and keep them as strong as possible.
Now, having the bumper off, I can actually start welding up all the seams, both inside and out. And to be fair, this does take a bit of time to do so, especially when you have to get into those weird angles or hold the bumper just right to get that weld correct. But welding both the inner and outer sides of a seam almost guarantees that any two plates are always properly stitched together. And it's best to do so because we want this bumper to take a hit and just be able to walk it off without even noticing it.
It is the next day and I have pretty much covered every single hole that is here. I've also added the recovery points. I've welded it lengthwise as much as possible to give it as much connection to the rest of the bumper as possible so this thing isn't going to rip off. I also added the safety hooks for towing, and both sides are pretty much patched up. Now I have just to grind and clean all of this up so that it looks nice and all the patchy welds are gone. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to set up the camera and get to it.
Finally, with the bulk of the welding done, we can get to grinding and cleaning. I'm knocking down pretty much all the welds flat so I can get that clean, seamless transition between the panels. And since I welded the back ends of all the seams, I'm not really worried about any of those cracking or splitting because they got thin. They are properly reinforced and they're stitched together on the back end. But this is also where I can get everything smooth but scuffed up enough to actually start applying primer and bed liner once this process is done.
Well, the rear bumper is done pretty much. I got everything welded up and ground down to a nicer finish. I still need to clean up for paint, but other than that, this rear bumper is set to go. If I just wanted to keep it as is, it is absolutely plated. Everything is welded up. There's no seams that are missing. The holes are patched in completely, and everything is tied in to the rear tube and making this a solid structure. Personally, if we wanted to keep it as is right now, we'd be okay with this, but we do want to add swing outs to this rear bumper so that we can have our spare tire and jerry cans and whatever else we want to attach on it when we put it on, so that we don't actually have to take this thing off and remodify it at a later point. But adding the swing outs will be its own entire video, and I'd like to show you that on the next one. So if you like this type of content and would like to follow along on this build, please like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, be safe and tread lightly.